The Tao of Self-Confidence, episode 687. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today I have a phenomenal lady on the show today. She is the beauty director at New York Magazine's The Cut, and I'm really excited to have her on and share her story with us today on self-confidence. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Kathleen Hou. Kathleen, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Sure. Hello. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, everyone, for having me on the podcast. Like Sheena said, I'm the beauty director at New York Magazine's The Cut. I've been there for a couple years now, and we're a feminist and fashion website. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And Kathleen, what's your cultural background?
Sure. So I am Taiwanese American. My parents were born in Taiwan, specifically in Tainan and Taipei. And then they both went to school in the U.S. and got married and had me and my little brother in New Jersey.
Thanks for sharing that. And Kathleen, what would be your favorite self-confidence quote?
I am not a big sports person or watcher of any kind of sports or player at all. I'm very unathletic. But this one quote I remember reading when I was a child has always stuck with me. It's a quote by the hockey player Wayne Gretzky. And he said that you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And that always struck with me because it's very true. I think a lot of times, for me personally, I'm afraid to ask something, or I think I'm like, oh, the answer is probably going to be no. But the truth is that you don't really know for sure if the answer is going to be no unless you ask.
Thanks for sharing that great quote. And I totally agree. It's better to, ask versus asking yourself, what if? Because you're going to drive yourself crazy, thinking, what if, what if, what if? So you're better off just asking. And if you get no, it's fine. Rejection's part of the process. But, if you get yes, that's great, right? It's just a bonus. So thanks for sharing that great quote. And in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
Self-confidence is hard to describe. I think that it's kind of for me anyway, I think it's an always moving thing. I think some days you feel more self-confident than others, and some days you just don't really feel that self-confident for whatever reason. I think it's a bit like wellness or your health or kind of anything in that regard, in the sense that you feel differently day to day. And I think that's part of the journey of life, is to figure out what it means for you and how that works going forward. For me, I think feeling self-confident is feeling bold and feeling completely like myself, whatever it is for that particular day. But I think always to not be too hard on yourself, but to realize that some days you have good days and sometimes you don't have good days. And just because you had a struggle one day, you're not feeling particularly great or self-confident, doesn't mean that you have to beat yourself up over it.
Thanks for sharing that. And, for me, confidence is always a forever journey. Like you mentioned, it's up and down. It's like a roller coaster. Sometimes we're on a high, sometimes we're on a low, sometimes it's upside down, sometimes it goes sideways. But, in the end, we just keep moving forward, right? Because, we can't dwell on the past, right? We can learn from it, and we can use that to, like I mentioned, keep moving forward. So I really like that definition that you mentioned. And Kathleen, what was your life like before your discovering self-confidence?
Like you said, self-confidence, I think, isn't a forever journey, right? So I think it starts from, for me, I think the first test of self-confidence came when, many Asian parents, my mom and dad had me do a lot of musical lessons and musical competitions and stuff like that growing up. So I played piano, and I also played violin. And part of the thing you have to do with that is that we always I always had to do different kind of competitions and recitals and things like that. And I think that was one of the first times that I recall feeling nervous. And I remember, I think our first, my first kind of big performance was my piano teacher. She's this lovely Japanese lady. She would have us do these twice yearly piano recitals at the library. Looking back, it's not that big a deal, but when you're 6 or whatever, and you have been rehearsing this one particular piece to play for months at a time, and you have to go up on stage in front of everyone and perform, that to me, I think, was the first test I remember of feeling nervous and feeling oh, this is really testing how how confident I could be. And I remember my mom would like try to pep talk me before, and she would just be like, try not to be so nervous, don't worry, and just kind of like breathe in and just kind of go with it. It was kind of ironic because I could see her in the audience all the time, like being really nervous and watching me and like feeling my nerves as well as hers. And I just remember when I was little feeling that nervousness. And I think over time, I think there's a few things. Like, I think that, there's the nerves of like the anticipation of doing something, like when you're about to go on stage. And once you get on stage and you have to play the piano, it's a combination of like preparation and putting your hands on it and just knowing you have to like go. Because I knew that I didn't want to be one of those kids that like flame out on the stage and like starts crying and would have to get off the stage and it would just be embarrassing. So just kind of like stealing your nerves, knowing that you've prepared and you've done everything you can, and putting your hands on the piano and kind of just letting like nature and what you've practiced take over, and kind of letting it being an almost automatic action. And then by the end of it, I mean, the piece isn't even really that long when you're playing it, especially when you're 6. You just kind of realize it was over with and it wasn't really that bad. So I think going back to what we were talking about with self-confidence and how I define it, but it's a combination of just feeling like yourself and just trusting yourself and knowing that what you've done so far and who you are is enough to take you to whatever you want to do, whether it's like feeling self-confident enough to play a piece that you've rehearsed as a 6-year-old, or if it's, I don't know, asking for a raise at work or asking for a new project, even just feeling self-confident enough to go to like a party alone. I think it's just feeling like you're enough and feeling like you've done enough to get to where you are and what you deserve to be there.
Thanks for sharing that. And, I think being nervous is part of everyone's, like when they do something new or something different, like everyone gets nervous. Even some of the biggest stars that do concerts like every night, they still feel those same nerves, right? I think it was Bono who mentioned like, he does get nervous, but he also feeds off it because it helps him go on stage and gives the best performance of his life. So when you realize like someone as big as Bono can be nervous before a concert, like it's just, it's relatable. It's like, okay, he goes through it and he still like cranks it out. And if he can do it, I can do it. And like you mentioned, you were 6, and at 6 years old, yeah, it's terrifying. It's terrifying to play in front of people. It doesn't matter if it's in the library or like in school. It's still terrifying at that age. But you went ahead and did it. And like you mentioned, it wasn't as big as we thought it was. And with fear, it's always like that. Like it's so big until you actually do it. And you're like, what was I afraid of? Right. And what was that like? Were there moments in your life when you realized, who, like, especially being like a director at a New York magazine and promoting feminism, like what were the aha moments that you realized you were more than enough to go out there and do it?
Before I was a writer and editor, I actually made a career switch. So just to give you a little bit of background, in college, I majored in finance and accounting. And, these are totally fine majors, but what I really wanted to major in was English. And I told my parents I wanted to major in English, and kind of in a very typical way, they were like, why do you want to major in English? They just didn't really see it as a very like suitable major, because what kind of career or kind of job can you get from majoring in English? I think they just kind of thought it'd be penniless living in their basement forever. So I went into 2 much more practical majors. And after college, I went into financial consulting for a few years. I was working there. I was doing okay, earning good money and like getting promoted, et cetera, et cetera. But the issue was that I really didn't like what I was doing. I would dread going into work every single day. I was working a lot of hours, so it was taking up a lot of my time and all weekend. I mean, I know we all, like most of us, like don't look forward to going into work, but I like really, really didn't look forward to going to work. And I was just thinking about, this is what I have for the rest of my life. Whether you like it or not, a lot of your life is going to be spent at work. And I really wanted to at least explore the idea of trying something and doing something where I didn't really hate it. I was talking about it a little with my parents, and my mom was not very on board with the idea of me trying to explore to do something different, which I understand. Obviously if you want your child to have success, and for her, as she thought it, success is being financially independent, having enough money to kind of be secure in life. And so to her, she doesn't see your job or your occupation as a way to be creatively fulfilled or to feel fulfilled in general. It's really just a way, like a means to an end. Like you work so that you have money hopefully you don't have to work a lot to get the money, and you have that money so you can like do things that you like doing and support your family and do fun things. It's not the kind of thing where it's like meant to fulfill you like deep inside. And her thought was just like, why can't you do like a job that's a little less demanding, make the money, and then use that money to go support your other passions and hobbies. And I mean, I didn't really want to do that. I kept thinking about how much time I'd have to spend at work and how unmotivated I would be if I knew that I really didn't like what I was doing at work. But I told my parents that I really wanted to quit my job and I really wanted to go to a new direction. I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to be a writer, which is just something I've always wanted to do since I was little. So yeah, I made the change. I went ahead and did it, even though they're both very, very, very upset. And I don't know if it was like necessarily feeling like I was enough, but it was more just going back to the Wayne Gretzky quote of, if I didn't try it, I would never know. But at least if I had tried it and it didn't work out and I decided it wasn't feasible, a no is better than really wondering what if. So I made the change and went ahead and did it. And it was really, really difficult to make a career change, as anyone who's ever done one knows. But luckily, it's worked out so far.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I know it's not always easy to leave a job that's comfortable, even though you hate it, and you have family and friends who tell you, what were you thinking? And, they see that as success, but for you, it wasn't, right? Like sometimes you were just probably in your office thinking like there has to be something more, right? Than just doing the day in, day out, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 thing. Not that it's a bad thing, but if you hate it, yeah, then, something's got to change, right? And like you mentioned, the change isn't easy, but, that's the beauty of it, is the journey that the transition like is beautiful because of where you are today. And because of that, what's your life been like now?
I think my parents wouldn't mind if I went back to my previous career, but I can't imagine going back to it. I'm so much happier and I don't regret making the change at all.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And, to the woman who's listening to your episode, she may be in her own journey to self-confidence. What would be that one tip you would give to her?
I think my one tip is that self-confidence isn't for everyone. I think a lot of times in Western culture, we think of self-confidence as being very, maybe speaking a lot or being very loud or, being very brash. I think that much like anything else, whether it be like love or wellness or health or style or anything, it's really about how you define it. I have some friends who I wouldn't say they're particularly very loud or very talkative, but I know that they're very self-confident people. They just prefer to observe and sometimes listen rather than to speak out first. And I think sometimes people underestimate those with that kind of personality. But self-confidence is about, the most important word there is self, right? So it's really about what you think and what you want. So I think it's worth being a little introspective and realizing that the way that self-confidence prevents itself for everyone is not the same.
Thanks for sharing that. I really love that tip because, I used to think being confident, you had to be loud and boisterous, but really you can be an introvert and still be confident. And the best thing about confidence is you decide what works for you. That helps you build that confidence, right? It can be meditation. It could be reading books. It could be surrounding yourself with, like-minded people. It could be doing what you love. Whatever it is, like the beauty of it is you can pick and choose what you want to do or how you want to build it. So I really love that tip that you mentioned. And, if our listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do or check out some of your work, is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
Yeah, sure. So all my writing work is at thecut.com. And I also have Instagram, which is just my name, Kathleen Hou, and Twitter, which I don't really update that often. So probably just Instagram and The Cut.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Kathleen, you can also head on over to the taoofselfconfidence.com and search for Kathleen's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I really just want to thank Kathleen today for taking the time to share her story and tips with us on self-confidence. So thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheena. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Not a problem. It was an honor to have you on the show. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com to check out cool resources, blog articles, show recaps, and so much more. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.